societies that think female genital mutilation is right. There are societies that have advocated slavery. And what we can say is they got it wrong. And because I accept that there are moral truths in the world, and it's all situational. Each situation needs to be addressed on its own. But situations are often so similar. And there may be the case that there's no situation in which this is a good action. Sam Harris writes about the moral landscape, and while I don't agree with him entirely, it's a really good representation of most of my thoughts about morality.
Have you ever thought, this is very interesting, and this will probably be my last question, and then
Sure.
I'll allow you to ask me questions if you want, but have you ever thought that maybe this was God's plan for you? Like you were searching for God's plan when you were younger, and maybe God is a secular humanist, and I could probably, because obviously if God was all wise, he would probably think about things, and it would, I mean, maybe he would come to more logical conclusions. Maybe we both agree that the Bible was written by people, and maybe God never believed in all that stuff, and maybe God is, believes in secular values, wants us to figure things out, and maybe this, what you do, was God's plan. Have you thought about that?
So there's two aspects of this, because I hear from Christians all the time who are actually advocating a God of the Bible, who are saying that this is God's plan because everything is God's plan, and that God wants me to spend some time as an atheist so that I have a much more powerful story when I come back to Christianity.
There we go.
I've said before, I could be rich any day I want to just by coming back to Christianity and talking about what all's wrong with atheism. And unfortunately, I'm way too ethical to do that. But the idea that there's a God who's a secular humanist, who this is his plan for me, there's some problems there. One is this idea of a plan for me. Who the hell is a God to come up with a plan for my life? Isn't it my life? I mean, I talk to college students quite often, and what I ask them is, would you want somebody to pick your major for you? Would you like your parents to sit down and decide, no, you're going to be a doctor? Or would you rather steer your own ship? And this is so immediately, viscerally recognizable to people in everyday life. They don't want somebody else dictating what they have to do. And yet when it comes to religion, people say, oh, God's got a plan for me and this is a good thing. Why is it a good thing? If it's not good in any other context, why is it good there? And so a secular humanist God, I think, would recognize this idea that having a plan for me is a bad idea. Also, a secular humanist God would become irrelevant. It wouldn't care about worship or adoration. It would be concerned with the affairs of humans. It would be taking actions that are in the best interest of humans, and it's not going to punish somebody for not believing. It's not going to punish somebody for failing honestly and using the information that they have at that time. It might fault people for not bettering themselves, but I don't know what the limits are on punishment, but if there's a secular humanist God, I don't know why a secular humanist God would create this particular universe I don't know why any God would create the universe in the first place. So I find the idea of a secular humanist God just preposterous. So no, I've never actually thought that's that God's plan. But I get email frequently saying that this is all part of the Christian God's plan.
I'll check the camera for 1 second.
Sure.
Right back. Going well. Looks pretty good. And so now at this stage of the interview, I will allow you to ask me questions. To give some background about myself, I'm very interested, as we discussed, in the topic of whether a God exists. I too had a Christian background, and as I've been reading, I've had to think about things and question my own beliefs. I called the show for the Atheist Experience for the first time, and you and Jeff were on in episode 802. I was the first caller, and I was very nervous because challenging Matt to a debate is kind of like challenging Mike Tyson to a boxing match. Yeah. But at this stage in the interview, if you wanted to ask me any questions or whatever.
Oh, I'd love to. I didn't actually get a chance to go back and watch the episode, and of course with 800 plus episodes or however many there are now, I don't remember everything. But and of course you can edit all of this out, and I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to get to understand it. do you actually believe that a God exists?
I would have to say, you know how Dawkins, or I think he has the 1 to 7 scale. 7 is you completely know that there is no God. One is that you know that there is, and he describes himself as like a 6.8 or something. I would say I would be more maybe between maybe a 3. Like, I do think so. You know, for a couple reasons. I mean, I definitely respect someone's atheism, and it's very hard to defend the. I mean, for example, I believe in aliens, but now I'm not claiming to be abducted or that I've seen it. But I mean, with all that's out there, with all the galaxies and billions of stars, probably with planets, I think that there probably are living things out there. You know, there's probably something that would qualify as an alien. Now, so we don't have evidence right now, but...
So when you talk about this, you say, I believe in aliens. And then when you describe it, you basically say that you believe there's probably aliens, which I think is 2 slightly different points. But I'm okay with that, you know, because, you know, do you believe that there are intelligent aliens out there? Because the fact that there may be life somewhere else in the universe doesn't tell us anything about whether and how likely it is that intelligent life is out there, or that it's still out there, or that it maybe used to be. Maybe we're the first, maybe we're the last, maybe we're in the middle. And I find it interesting that you go to aliens to discuss something that's probable. And when we're talking about God, I'm not a big fan of the scale. It only serves to kind of demonstrate that I'm not asserting the absolute, you know, that there aren't any gods. I'm up there with Dawkins at 6.8 or 6.9 probably. But my big thing is, because you address each proposition independently, that scale tries to address 2 propositions. One is, I'm absolutely positive God exists, and 7 is, I'm absolutely positive God doesn't exist. I only, you know, when I'm constructing logical arguments and stuff, I'm only focused on the 1 point. And so when you say you're, you know, between a 3 and a 4 or whatever, to me it sounds like you actively believe that there's something that would qualify as a God. Could you define anything about that something?
That is a good question. Well, let's see. Number 1 would have been responsible for the Big Bang.
Okay.
I mean, would have set that in motion. There's a couple reasons, and I think there's probably 3 reasons why, and I do want to answer the question, but there's 3 reasons why people believe in God. 1 is out of fear. 2 is because someone like a Ken Miller, they have looked at the facts and they've come away believing in it. And 3 is because they just do. And I do have to, I know that it's not I do have to cautiously say that I just do. I mean, I look at the Big Bang, and we actually talked about this in the episode I called in. I mentioned the argument from complexity, you know, that the chances, your response was very good, but I brought up the chances that life would have come in, you know, that we would have ended up these people with the brains and the eyes that are so complicated, and what would have been the chances from the Big Bang and the creation of the Earth. And I mean,
how do you determine what those chances are? How do you determine that we are such an unlikely, well, first of all, Big Bang model may or may not be correct, but setting aside the model, you're basically arguing that there must have been something that caused it.
Someone behind it, right?
Why does that have to be a someone,
right,
and not some natural cause that's not a thinking agent that we don't understand because we can't get past, you know, the Planck time. We can't go back and look before the universe, or even if before the universe makes any sense.
Right. That's a very good question. And you brought this up. You even brought up when I called. You brought up if we're playing poker and I happen to get a full house or something, you know, or if I happen to get, you know, a junk hand, you know, it's the odds of getting either was
exactly the same. Any specific 5 cards, whether it's, you know, 10 Jack Queen King Ace of Spades, or 3 of clubs, 2 of diamonds, 5 of hearts, Jack and spades, and Queen of diamonds, the odds of getting those two specified hands are exactly the same. When we talk about, well, first of all, complexity is not the hallmark of design. Simplicity is the hallmark of design. We design, intelligently designed things are not complex. They are simplified, they are streamlined, they are efficient. But when you talk about things like the eye, we know that the eye evolved by natural processes, and we have examples of almost every intermediary stage in animals that are actually living. So, you know, I don't see the eye as anything.
Evidence, right?
I don't see that how that becomes, oh, this just couldn't have happened, when we know that it did, and we know that it can, and we have examples of all these other things. This idea that it's just so unlikely that beginning with the Big Bang, that we end up here and now without supernatural guidance. I don't know how anybody could possibly make that claim, because in order to determine how likely something is, and in order to determine what the likely causes of it are, you have to have some demonstration that a particular cause is likely. We explain things in terms of other things that we understand. When you explain a God, has no explanatory power. It's an attempt to solve a mystery with a bigger mystery. And the gods tend to be panaceas. If you have somebody who can do anything, it can serve as an answer for anything. Oh, how did the universe get here? Well, we need something that's capable of creating a universe, so either it's universe creating pixies or a god, and a god can do everything. Well, I would say that while we can't demonstrate that either of them are possible, and we can't demonstrate that either of them are plausible, universe creating pixies are more plausible than a god, because these don't have the baggage of being able to do anything. They only have to do this one specific thing. And so this claim is more extraordinary. This claim is the one that violates Occam's razor. Actually, this one violates it too, because when we get back, the correct answer is we don't know. And until somebody offers an explanation, and we can determine that the explanation is plausible, and then we determine how plausible it is. It's one thing to say, wow, it's extraordinary that we're here. This just seems so bizarre. I'll admit it. It seems so amazing that I'm alive, that I'm here, that the universe is the way it is. I mean,
and you know, the Earth protects us from outer space. We can live in it. There's
yeah,
rain, there's a system. There's, you know, like there's a system where we can live. I mean, I know that it's,
but that's backwards. So Douglas Adams has this quote about design, and I'm going to get it partially wrong. Imagine that a puddle of water gains consciousness one day, and it's laying there and it looks around and it's like, wow, what a wonderful day this is. And isn't it amazing how this particular pothole has formed to fit me in perfectly? We've evolved to fit the earth on which we inhabit. So to point to all of the things about this earth that make life possible for us and say, wow, that's just extraordinary, is to get it exactly backwards. We are what this earth could produce, and it did. If the conditions on Earth had been different and they'd been amenable to some other form of life, or you could do it on another planet, you could do it on Earth with different conditions, you could do it with a different Big Bang. You adjust these cosmological constants a little bit, you end up with a planet that we also have this arrogance that life as we understand it is the only possible life, which I don't know how anybody came to that conclusion. But reset the machinery and make one small little change, and whatever evolves, if it gets to a point of conscious awareness, is going to look around and say the exact same thing. How amazing that this particular planet I'm on exactly fits my needs, which is the opposite of what we know to have happened.
well, that's a very good point.
I'll give it to Douglas Adams and all the guys who came before. I didn't do it.
Well, the whole thing. Yeah.
And so my thing is, you know, when I hear the classical arguments for the existence of God, oh, there must have been a first cause. Okay. Even if you were right, that there must have been some first cause, you can't tell me anything about that cause. You have no reason to think that it's actually a thinking agent. There's no reason to say that it's not some natural process we don't understand because we can't investigate it. When you say that the appearance of design points to a creator, Well, we recognize design not by complexity but by simplicity. But the real thing we do to recognize design is by contrast with nature. Design is the opposite of nature. Some things are naturally occurring, some aren't. If you're walking along in a field and you come across a stream and there's a whole bunch of sticks blocking the stream, is it a beaver dam, or did those sticks just flood and happen to collect there? Well, how do we tell the difference? We don't get to call it a beaver dam until we demonstrate that it's a beaver dam. We need to look for the difference. And the difference is that sticks that naturally form together in floods and stuff like that have these characteristics. And sticks that have been used by beavers to construct a dam have these characteristics. It's not that looking at a beaver dam tells you that there must be a beaver. It does. But the reason you know there's a beaver is because we understand that beaver dams come from beavers. When people look at the universe, what they'll say is creation requires a creator, which is cheating. You don't get to label it creation yet, just like you don't get to label it a beaver dam yet. We have a universe. We have a bunch of sticks. In order to demonstrate that it's created by a beaver or by a god, you need to be able to contrast it with things that are naturally occurring, and you need actual evidence for that, which we don't have. We have no other universes to examine. Nobody can tell me what an undesigned universe looks like. Some of them would just say it's impossible, and I want to know, how did you determine that an undesigned universe is impossible? There's all these assertions, and the truth is, it may just be a bunch of sticks. I can point to, I'm not an expert in beaver dam recognition. And so when I first come across sticks in a stream, I might conclude, oh, look what the beavers did. And I could be completely wrong, only because I've heard that beavers do this, and I haven't investigated any further. But if we look at it and we see, chew marks, and we see mud packing, and we see, an entrance and all this other stuff, those are things that we have no evidence for them occurring naturally, and mountains of evidence for them occurring by beavers.
What confuses people is, and what confuses me, is that something could. We tend to think of things as having to have a beginning, and
yes.
to think that the universe. I mean, some people have. I do think, if I'm not mistaken, that maybe Carl Sagan suggested that it was eternal. That the universe was eternal.
Carl Sagan had a line like that, where they were talking about the possibility of an infinite regress. And someone had said something along the lines of, we need to insert a God at this point so that we stop the infinite regress. And he's like, why stop? Well, it was kind of a note he had. And I think it's in Varieties of Religious Experience, which his wife Anne put together after his death. I think that story is in there.
And that's confusing because, so, like, how could something be eternal? I mean, it's just...
So we have a really hard time processing things like that. Like, we can't, we're really bad at understanding and processing things like infinity. You don't even have to go that far. Just the very, very vast is already cumbersome for us. A universe that is 13.7 billion years old. How do you have any? I have no understanding of 13.7 billion years. I mean, yes, I can look at the numbers and I can kind of extrapolate, but we see the world through little bitty visors, both geographically and temporally. There's some great illustrations on the internet that start at the Earth and show the Earth compared to the sun, and then the sun compared to the biggest star, which is just mind-boggling. I mean, and then this compared to galaxies, and then there's billions of galaxies.
Yeah.
We're so horrible at addressing that, and so when people say things like time began with the Big Bang, and so what the idea that there's something before the Big Bang is already nonsensical because there's no time, which I kind of get off on the tangent of how can a God exist outside of space and time? How can a God act outside of space and time? Because acting is temporal as well. But the fact that we can't comprehend something, solution. Because if you try to solve a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery, you haven't solved anything. What you've done is you've put up a wall and said, there be dragons beyond this, don't explore, don't investigate. And that's one of the things that religion does. By asserting answers about the real world, it stifles progress. It prevents us from going out and finding answers. We saw it with, Galileo when he dared to suggest that the Earth might not be the center of the universe or the solar system. And because the church's particular model at the time disagreed with that, let's lock him up. How many other things are religions claiming about reality, without good reason, without supporting evidence, that are preventing people from looking further? Fortunately, we live in a world where a lot of people have not been satisfied by those answers, and they don't stop. They keep going on. They keep this spirit of exploration. They want to go out and say, you know what? If that answer is right, then my investigation of it should confirm that it's right. Because the truth has nothing to fear from inquiry. The truth has nothing to fear from asking questions.
That's a very good quote, actually. I remember that. Did you have other questions for me?
No.
I mean, I guess
I don't, it's your thing. I
hope I answered like why I still kind of believe. I mean,
I think it's fixable.
It is amazing, the Big Bang. I mean, as we discussed on the phone, sometimes we get past our intellectual capacity. I mean, evolution, you can kind of follow, but when you start studying astronomy, it kind of gets past my...
But if you don't understand it, then you certainly can't have any good reason for proposing an explanation or accepting a proposed explanation. For example, when it comes to the origin of the universe, I have acknowledged many times that the Big Bang model is the current best model that explains that instance or that beginning. It is a scientific model in the sense that it makes predictions which were borne out. If the Big Bang model is accurate, then we would see these particular indications in the cosmic microwave background radiation. We measured it, that prediction was accurate, and so the model stands. It's entirely possible that that model could be wrong. As a matter of fact, I have a physicist friend who's looking at a paper that proposes a different model for the universe, dramatically different, that would also change the age of the universe and the Big Bang. I don't understand either well enough to assess which one is correct. And so I don't go around saying, I believe the Big Bang is true. My position is that the Big Bang is the best current model for the universe. It's just like Newtonian physics. It's wrong. It's wrong in many senses, and Einstein's relativity, kind of demonstrates this to some extent. This idea of a flat Earth and forces, it still works. It's still a good model where within the scope of what it works for. It doesn't work with the very, very small and the very, very big, which is why we need quantum mechanics, etc., which is actually better. But the Earth isn't flat,
right.
And yet we keep building houses that are level. And so you build with that foundation, and what you build upon that foundation, and in that small scope, it's flat. My yard is flat for all intents and purposes. Well, actually, my front yard slopes, but the Earth is curved, but we can still work in this plane, because in this particular realm, those physics work, those calculations work. They work incredibly well. But you don't want to use a yardstick to measure an atom. You can't. I mean, it isn't finely grained enough. You pull up the microscope that you can get at Walmart for kids, you're not going to be able to see an electron on it. You're not going to be able to see an electron anyway, but if you try to measure something with something that a tool or a system that can't measure it, how good are your results going to be? And so if you don't know anything, and if you don't comprehend the origin of the universe, not only could I never say, I believe this one is true, or I believe this one is likely to be true, I don't know that I could say anything much about it. I'm still in the I don't know. And so I get the idea of maybe leaning towards, oh, I lean towards this answer. Why? Why would you lean towards the God answer? Why would you lean towards an answer that has no explanatory power because it's a mystery, solution for a mystery? But also, why would you lean towards an answer that could be an explanation for anything? Because if something can explain anything, it explains nothing. I mean, that's the problem with a panacea. Hey, we've got a medicine that cures everything, and it doesn't actually cure anything. In this case, God did it. It's indistinguishable logically from its magic. And so when somebody says, hey, we have to have some explanation for the origin of the universe, I'm leaning a little towards the God one. What I hear is I'm leaning a little towards magic. Have you got any good reason to think that magic's true or possible? Wouldn't it be better to lean towards, you know, I don't know, but naturalistic explanations are where we're going to start looking because we have this limit, that's all we can look at. I mean, science isn't about philosophical naturalism, it's about methodological naturalism. It's recognizing the limits of our ability to investigate. And so we can't investigate supernatural causes, which is why we don't allow it in courtrooms anymore.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking part in the video. I guess that
Sure.
was a minute. Yeah. But thank you very much, Matt. And thank you for letting me tour the ACA library.
Oh, please. Thanks, Dave. I told you it wouldn't be a half hour.
Yeah. Yeah.